The iPhone 10 versus the iPhone 8 Plus. Which one is faster? Well, wait a second, Daniel. They both have the exact same processor, the Apple 11 chip, 3GB of RAM, so they both should have exactly the same speed, right? Well, yes, they both have exactly the same speed. So thank you for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Deck, signing out. Cheers. No, obviously joking. The iPhone 10 actually has a much higher resolution display, so it would be pretty interesting to see if we get any performance differences between those two because of that. And spoiler, we do, and the results are actually very, very surprising. So welcome to my ultimate speed test series. So in this series I test out everything in depth, not just the usual Apple on speed test, but also photo and video processing, especially 4K video editing, Wi-Fi speed test, storage speed test, RAM management, fingerprint speed test, and in this case Face ID versus Touch ID, which one is faster. That would be pretty interesting to see. Multiple GPU and CPU benchmarks, JavaScript performance, and so much more. So grab some snacks or whatever you want to grab and enjoy the ultimate speed test between the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8 Plus. It's the 8 Plus, not the 7 Plus, because it has a glass back, by the way. So yeah, 10 versus 8 Plus. Enjoy. Okay, so I have exactly the same apps installed on both. Screen rotation lock is set to never on both. True tone display is disabled, and I've set the brightness to about the same level on both of these phones. I've then enabled airplane mode, Bluetooth is off, Wi-Fi is turned on, rotation lock is on, do not disturb mode is also on. Brightness is again 625 nits actually on both, so that's the maximum brightness. Silent mode is also on, and then I've also removed the SIM card from both the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8 Plus. I've closed all the apps running in the background, and if you take a look at the battery level, while I was doing this test, the iPhone 8 Plus is down to 96%, whereas the iPhone 10 is still at 100%. Okay, so starting off with the actual specs first, we have 3GB of RAM on both, and also the Apple A11 processor on both, which comes with 2 high-performance cores clocked at 2.39 GHz each, and then 4 low-performance cores at about 1.6 GHz each, and they're also based on a 10nm process, the Apple A11 chips. So exactly the same specs on both of these phones. The only difference is actually the resolution of the display. So on the iPhone 10 we have 2436 by 1125, which actually translates to a PPI of 458 versus 1920 by 1080 on the iPhone 8 Plus, which translates to PPI of 401. So it's going to be interesting to see by how much the iPhone 10 is going to be slowed down by this increased resolution. Okay, so starting off with the Apple on speed test first, I've started a timer on both, and I'm going to go through some daily used apps at first. So BBC News, CNN, Twitter, Instagram, the camera app, these are the apps that I'm going to run first. And as you can see, the iPhone 10 is actually ahead of the iPhone 8 Plus by a pretty big lead. So it's already running Crossy Road, which is the first game that I'm going to test. This is a 2D game, so it's something easier for the processor and for the GPU. So 3 taps. Now I'm going to open Hitman Go, which is actually one of my favorite games. This is an amazing game. You have to give it a go. Haha. By the way, give it a go. Yeah, it's a really good game. It's a puzzle game, not sponsored. But yeah, the iPhone 10 is actually quite ahead of the iPhone 8 Plus, as you can see. Now, I'm not sure why this is the case. It's probably because of the home button. So it's actually much quicker just closing the apps and going to the home screen, sliding up, than having to press that home button. So that actually makes a pretty big difference. So as you can see, the iPhone 8 Plus is actually catching up to the iPhone 10. So the iPhone 10 has almost finished loading. Yeah, the image is centered, so I've closed Temple Run. Temple Run is loading on the iPhone 8 Plus. The iPhone 10 is already loading up Minecraft, so continue, and I'm going to create a new world and see how quick both of these phones create a new world. So the iPhone 10, the iPhone 8 Plus is actually catching up, so I'm really curious to see if the iPhone 8 Plus is going to win this, because in the end it has a lower resolution display, so everything should load up much quicker, and it should run much smoother on the iPhone 8 Plus than the iPhone 10 because of that lower resolution display, 1080p versus 2436 by 1125. So as you can see, they're almost at the same game. So now it's The Trigger 2, which is a really demanding game, or a really demanding app, if you like to put it that way. And the next one is GTA San Andreas, again a really demanding app for these phones. And the iPhone 8 Plus is almost done, so I'm going to see how fluid this is. So this is perfectly playable, and GTA San Andreas is almost done loading on the iPhone 10, and it's just loading on the iPhone 8 Plus. So there you go. GTA San Andreas is now fully loaded, and it seems that the iPhone 8 Plus is almost catched up to the iPhone 10. Now I'm guessing that the reason why the iPhone 10 is so fast is because of that home button, because of that lack of home button. It's so much quicker just going home. Now the next test is the photo editing test. I'm going to open up this image on the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8. So this is a 5K 5K image, and I'm going to adjust the vibrancy, and I'm going to export this and see how fast both of these phones export this image. So same thing, same test on the iPhone 8 Plus. So I'm going to go into the second menu, go back to vibrancy, adjust the vibrancy, and now the last test is a video exporting test. So in this case, I'm going to use iMovie because this is the most optimized app for iOS, or at least it should be. And this is a 1-minute clip. This is 4K shot in 2997 frames per second on my GH5, and I've multiplied that by 10 times. So I actually have a 10-minute clip of 10 separate 1-minute individual clips. And I'm going to export this on both, and I'm going to see which one is faster. Is the iPhone 8 Plus going to surpass the iPhone 10, or is the iPhone 10 going to win with that pretty big lead of about 20 seconds, 15 seconds that the iPhone 10 had? So let me just fast forward this and see which phone is actually going to export this video first. So honestly, I was expecting this to take 5 minutes to export like it did in different video editing apps like Videoshop or Adobe Clip, but for some reason in iMovie, it took about 14 minutes to export this video. And there you go, the iPhone 10 actually finished exporting this first in 17 minutes and 31 seconds. And I actually got an error on the iPhone 8 Plus towards the end that I don't have enough space to save it, but regardless, the iPhone 8 Plus was about 20 seconds, late, even more than 20 seconds if I had enough space to export this video, than the iPhone 10. So there you go, the iPhone 10 actually won the speed test by a lead of 20 plus seconds. Next up, moving on to the RAM management test, I want to see how many of these apps are still open in the background. So the clock is, BBC News isn't, so this one actually had to reload on both, but it actually reloaded first on the iPhone 10. So CNN, again, same story, has to reload on both. The Twitter, oh, this one is actually fully loaded on the iPhone 8 Plus. Interesting, and it has to reload on the iPhone 10. Instagram, same story, fully loaded on the iPhone 8 Plus, but had to reload on the iPhone 10. Camera, again, same story, fully loaded on the iPhone 10. Crossy Road, okay, this one has to reload on both. Let's try Hitman Go. This one fully loaded on the iPhone 10, on the iPhone 8 Plus, so interesting. So it seems that RAM management is so much better. There you go. Temple Run 2, fully loaded on the iPhone 8 Plus and not Minecraft, same story, fully loaded on the iPhone 8 Plus and not loaded on the iPhone 10. So it seems that there's a pretty big difference when it comes to RAM management. It's so much better on the iPhone 8 Plus and not the iPhone 10. It's probably because of that. There you go, again. That trigger 2, same story. So there you go, RAM management is significantly better on the iPhone 8 Plus and not the iPhone 10. So this is most likely caused by the high resolution display. Keep in mind that when you load such a high resolution app, which is almost 2x the resolution of the iPhone 8 Plus, if the app has been updated to support all the 2K artwork, then obviously that would take up more memory. So that's why it seems that RAM management is more aggressive on the iPhone 10 than the iPhone 8 Plus. So now that I've closed all the apps running in the background, I want to do an app performance speed test. So I'm going to test different apps and see which one loads up first. And Minecraft, this one actually loaded up first on the iPhone 8 Plus and not the iPhone 10. So now I'm going to create a new world, and I'm going to use exactly the same seed, so exactly the same map essentially on both. And I'm going to see which phone actually creates which one actually generates the world first. And in this case, it seems that both phones actually generated the world at exactly the same time. But keep in mind that the iPhone 10 hasn't been updated to the full resolution because you have those black bars. So essentially, this is still rendered at 1080p on the iPhone 10. Actually, I think it's even lower. I think it's the iPhone 8's resolution, 1334 by 750, not 1080p. Moving on to that trigger 2, this one loaded up exactly at the same time on both. But again, it hasn't been updated on the iPhone 10, as you can see. But if you take a look at the frame rate, so both are pretty smooth, but the iPhone 8 Plus is actually so much smoother than the iPhone 10. So if you take a look at the smoke, obviously this video is not in 60 frames per second, but if you take a look at the smoke, it's definitely 60 frames per second on the iPhone 8 Plus, and probably about 40, maybe even less than 40 on the iPhone 10. So there's quite a lot of choppiness on the iPhone 10, at least when it comes to the smoke and the effects. Moving on to GTA San Andreas, this one loaded up exactly at the same time on both. Now, when it comes to fluidity, I think the iPhone 8 Plus is a tiny bit more fluid, a few extra frames, but not that much of a difference as in that trigger 2. So yeah, GTA San Andreas, this is not that much of a demanding game when compared to Dead Trigger 2 or other games, but there is still a subtle difference. I'm not sure if you can tell from the video. Now, I've closed all the apps running in the background, so let's begin the actual benchmark. So starting off with Geekbench 4, this is a cross-platform benchmark, and interesting enough, Geekbench 4 actually reports 2.72 gigabytes of memory or RAM on the iPhone 10 versus 2.92 on the iPhone 8 Plus. So there we go. It seems that Apple doesn't allow the full 3 gigabytes of RAM to be accessible by apps. So only 2.72 compared to 292 on the iPhone 8 Plus. And the iPhone 8 Plus actually finished first with the iPhone 10 just about a second behind, and the scores are pretty similar. So these are within the margin of error. We get 200 points higher on the multi-core on the iPhone 10, but essentially the same score, so no performance difference when it comes to the actual CPU clock. And if you take a look at the RAM, again, 2.72 versus 2.92 on the iPhone 8 Plus. So a big difference when it comes to accessible to the memory that's actually accessible by apps. Next up, I'm going to run an Antutu benchmark. So this is a more general benchmark. So this one stresses out the CPU, the GPU, the memory, the storage, pretty much everything. And at the end, obviously, you'll get a score. So now it's doing a couple of GPU tests. So let me just forward all this and take a look at the final scores. So in this case, the iPhone 10 actually finished up first, followed by the iPhone 8 Plus by about 1 second or 2 seconds after. And the score was actually a bit higher on the iPhone 10, so 216,000 versus 206,000 on the iPhone 8 Plus. But take a look at the actual individual scores, 3D, user experience, and well, that's pretty much it. Those were actually higher on the iPhone 10 than the iPhone 8 Plus. Pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting to see this, especially when it came to the 3D section. Now, moving on to the GPU benchmark, the first one that I'm going to run is a Geekbench 4 compute benchmark. So this one is run in Metal and again stresses out the GPU performance but off screen. So the results should be really similar on both. So there we go. The iPhone 10 actually finished first, getting a score of 15,296 and 15,182 on the iPhone 8 Plus. So again, both of these are within the margin of error. So pretty much the same score on both. Same Metal performance and Geekbench 4 compute. Now, the only difference that I can see in the results is when it comes to the motherboard model number, which again is expected because we have a completely new and different motherboard on the iPhone 10, which is actually a stacked motherboard versus the iPhone 8 Plus one. Then the second GPU benchmark that I'm going to run is 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme. So this is one of the most demanding GPU benchmarks that you can do, by the way. So this one is actually ran in the device's native resolution, so 2436 by 1125 on the iPhone 10, and on the iPhone 8 Plus we have 1920 by 1080, but I actually believe that it hasn't been updated, as you can see, to the full resolution. So I think it's still being ran in 1334 by 750 actually on the iPhone 10 and not a full resolution. So let me just fast forward all this and take a look at the results. Okay, so there we go, 2629 and 2735 on the iPhone 8 Plus. So a pretty small difference, to be honest. In case you're wondering why the brightness is so low, it's actually maxed out on both, but there's this glitch. And Slingshot Extreme, the brightness always gets, I don't know, 20% even though it's maxed out. So I have to restart the devices to get the brightness up. But if you take a look at the actual results, the iPhone 8 Plus actually got a higher score in all the graphic tests, except for the physics one, in which the iPhone 10 actually got a higher score. So pretty interesting. So it seems that the benchmark wasn't actually running in 1334 by 750 on the iPhone 10 after all. And finally, for a third graphics test, I want to run a GFX Bench Manhattan test. So this one is running off screen, same as the Geekbench 4 compute test, but that one was run in Metal. This one is actually ran in OpenES 3.0. So we should actually see pretty much exactly the same result on both, because again, this is running 1080p off screen. So there you go, taking a look at the final results, we get 84 frames per second on the iPhone 10 versus 85 on the iPhone 8 Plus, so pretty much the same. Next up, I want to run a SoundSpider JavaScript test. So this one tests out the JavaScript rendering performance on both of these devices. So this is actually affected directly by the CPU performance and also by the browser. And I just want to see if the resolution of the display has anything to do about this. So we have 159 milliseconds on the iPhone 10, and on the iPhone 8 Plus we get 155.7. So essentially within the margin of error. So essentially the same result. Now I want to do a storage speed test and see if we get any differences when it comes to the actual read and write speed. So we get 477 megabytes per second for the write speed on the iPhone 10 versus 164 megabytes. So a pretty big difference between the two. In terms of the read speed and in terms of the write speed, and in terms of the read speed, we get about the same, so about 1 gigabyte per second or 700 megabytes in some cases, but there's still a pretty big difference when it comes to the write speed, so 400 and about actually lower than 100 megabytes per second on the iPhone 8 Plus. Now keep in mind, the iPhone 8 Plus is 64 gigabytes and the iPhone 10 is 256, and the higher the capacity, the faster the flash storage is going to be. So that's mostly the reason why we see such a big difference in terms of the write speed. Moving on to the Wi-Fi speed test, I'm connecting connected to the same 5 GHz network, and I'm going to run the test separately on both of these devices. So on the iPhone 10 we get 109 megabits per second as the download speed and 147 as the upload speed. And on the iPhone 8 Plus I've actually run this test quite a few times because I was getting quite substantially lower Wi-Fi performance, but now I'm getting about 106 download, and so pretty much the same for the upload. So both of these scores, except maybe the upload one, so the download one is definitely within the margin of error. The upload one seems to be quite a bit higher on the iPhone 10, but regardless, both of these phones have really fast Wi-Fi and essentially the same Wi-Fi card, by the way, inside. And finally, I want to do one more test, and that's Face ID versus Touch ID. Which one is faster and which one is more reliable? So as you can see from this video, what I'm trying to do is obviously I have the camera set up at a different angle so that Face ID can actually see my face. So I'm tapping on the display on the iPhone 10, and I'm just pressing the power button to activate a display on the iPhone 8 Plus. And they both work really fast, but as you can see, Touch ID is actually much faster than the iPhone 10's Face ID. Okay, so in the end, surprisingly, the iPhone 10 was actually faster overall, even though it comes with a higher resolution display. But the iPhone 8 Plus managed to keep most apps open in the background actually, which is really surprising. So the difference in RAM management was huge. So it was actually similar to the difference in RAM management between the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6s. So it does seem that Apple did implement freeing up the memory differently on the iPhone 10, so it's far more aggressive. Again, it's mostly because of the high resolution display, since all the app assets, so textures and artwork, if the app is updated, of course, it would be loaded in almost twice the resolution of the iPhone 8 Plus, and therefore it would consume twice the amount of memory. But free to subscribe if you want to see more ultimate speed tests like this one, and also check out my ultimate camera comparisons. I've done quite a few. The last one was between the iPhone 10 and the Samsung Galaxy S8, if you want to see how good or how bad the camera on the iPhone 10 really is. By the way, it's pretty good. Don't forget to enable notifications by tapping on that bell icon so that you get notified whenever a brand new video comes out. Don't forget to consider like if you enjoyed it, let me know. It took a pretty long time to make, so every feedback is really appreciated. And yeah, this has been pretty much it. Also let me know in the comments which ultimate speed test do you want me to do next? Which phones should I compare? But yeah, this has been pretty much it. So thank you for watching. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. So, signing out. Cheers.